Hey there, good morning. It's Tom Jordan. And boy, a lot of us are bleary eyed. Been a long night watching the returns come in. Thanks to all who joined us last night for our live stream of election night coverage of 2024. But it is the day after, and Donald Trump securing a historic comeback victory, winning key battleground states, claiming more than 270 electoral votes. Right now, it's what is it, 200. And 77 is where it stands right now. We're still waiting on Nevada, technically, and the state of Michigan, where it's pretty tight there as well, and the state of Arizona. But this is a huge victory, and the media, they're saying this is this kind of a comeback victory. It is a rarity, and the nation rallied around Donald Trump. These battleground states, he hailed, Donald Trump did, and we're going to hear some clips from him in just a moment. But Donald Trump said this was the greatest political movement in U.S. history. He might be right about that. He vowed in his speech last night to lead America into a golden age, is the way he called it. And he promised unwavering dedication to restoring the nation's strength, to restoring the nation's security, and to restoring prosperity for all citizens. Every single person in this country is his aim, and that's his goal. And you know what? I believe him. And I think now most Americans do as well. And if they don't, they're starting to. And they're no longer believing the contrived and fake facts that the media spouts out, that Trump is going to ruin the world if he's elected. Yeah, the gig is up, essentially. And much of the media has become irrelevant. And people are smart. And it takes a minute for the truth to catch up, but people are seeing the gross cover-up, the cover-up operation that the New York Times, CBS News, ABC, NBC, go down the list, CNN, MSNBC, the Washington Post, they've been part of this cover-up on behalf of the Democratic Party for many years now. And people, I believe, feel betrayed. And it was them all along, the news media. And Trump just may have been right that much of the media is spouting fake news. And I think it takes a lot of introspection right now from all these so-called journalists who are really activists and advocates for the Democratic Party. So we're going to get into that. We're going to get into the Donald Trump speech and J.D. Vance and the non-existent Kamala Harris speech last night because she went home and told her supporters to go home as well. All of that coming up in just a few moments. I want to thank the folks who came out last night to Wayne Radio, Tom Jordan Live Studios, to join us for the election night watch party as we cover the returns here on Tom Jordan Live for several hours last night. And thanks to Rob Johnson, the CEO of Wayne Radio, for what he's doing by giving all of you a voice. Appreciate Rob Johnson very much. Also, just a reminder to chime in and comment or ask questions in the comments section. I'll get to those in a moment. Love to hear your feedback. What do you think of what has transpired? Maybe you don't like it. I'd like to hear from you as well. Also, the very best way that you can help Tom Jordan Live is simply to subscribe. Of course, it's free. Click the notification bell, watch the video, and share it if you could. That's a huge way that you can help. Very much appreciate it. All right, last night, or was it this morning after midnight? In any case, Donald Trump spoke after he'd been announced the projected winner of the presidential race. And Trump emphasized his belief that his victory marks the greatest political movement of all time, framing this win as not just a victory for him, but for the American people. He rallied his supporters, declaring that the movement is far from over. It's just beginning, and it's going to evolve to address the nation's pressing issues head on. Here's a little bit of what he had to say last night.
Well, I want to thank you all very much. This is great. These are our friends. We have thousands of friends in this incredible movement. This was a movement like nobody's ever seen before. And frankly, this was, I believe, the greatest political movement of all time. There's never been anything like this in this country and maybe beyond. And now it's going to reach a new level of importance because we're going to help our country heal. We're going to help our country heal. We have a country that needs help, and it needs help very badly. We're going to fix our borders. We're going to fix everything about our country. And we made history for a reason tonight, and the reason is going to be just that. We overcame obstacles that nobody thought possible, and it is now clear that we've achieved the most incredible political thing. Look what happened. Is this crazy? But it's a political victory that our country has never seen before, nothing like this. I want to thank the American people for the extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president and your 45th president. And every citizen, I will fight for you, for your family, and your future. Every single day, I will be fighting for you, and with every breath in my body, I will not rest until we have delivered the strong, safe, and prosperous America that our children deserve and that you deserve. This will truly be the golden age of America. That's what we have to have. This is a magnificent victory for the American people that will allow us to make America great again. And in addition to having won the battleground states of North Carolina, I love these places, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, we are now winning in Michigan, Arizona, Nevada, and Alaska, which would result in us carrying at least 315 electoral votes. But it's much easier doing what the networks did or whoever called it, because there was no other path. There was no other path to victory. We also have won the popular vote. That was great. Very proud of that.
Yeah, that's a big difference, right? From 2016, he won the popular vote and he won the looks like the Electoral College right now. And he did mention Michigan right now. He is up in Michigan, 97% of the votes counted. It's very tight still, 49.91%, so about 50%. That means Donald Trump in Michigan is up almost 2 points over Kamala Harris, so it looks like he's going to take it, but they're still counting the votes in the Democratic stronghold of Wayne County, which is where Detroit is seated. And Alyssa Slok and Mike Rogers now tied. I think it's 49.5% each, or 48.5% apiece. And Mike Rogers had been a couple points ahead, I think, or a few points ahead of Alyssa Slotkin up until early this morning when some of those Wayne County votes have been counted. So we're still watching that race, which is a very important, Senate race. But again, the Senate is now in the hands of the GOP come January, because they've now taken the majority in that. Nevada, we're still watching that. Trump ahead almost 5 points there with 51%, about 84% of the votes counted in the state of Nevada. Also watching Arizona. Again, Trump up almost 5 points there. So he talked about this golden age of America. Make America great again. It's not a bad word. It's not a bad phrase. You should want America to be great again if you're a citizen of the United States. And that's been his vision. And it centers, the vision does, on national revival. We're talking about strong borders, safe communities, economic opportunity, and a reassertion of America's power on the global stage. That's important, because if we don't have that, we put ourselves and other of our allies at risk. And that's what we've seen play out in the last 3.5 years. Donald Trump did reflect on the historic nature of his victory. He noted the significant hurdles that, of course, his campaign has had to overcome. And then he looked at his battleground wins in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, North Carolina, as proof of this movement's reach and effectiveness. And it is the Big Tent Party. I think the Republican Party always has been, but it's been mischaracterized as something altogether different. And people are realizing, actually, that might be the party, not perfect, but the party that is better for me on a personal level. If I want to get out of the whole partisan argument type of thing, myself being beholden to a partisan viewpoint, What's better for me? And it seems like the Republican Party might be because it's constitutional values, which again, at the very basic level, means they care about every individual in this country. So don't again believe the media hype that's out there. Again, the jig is up. I believe it is. And the media better change because it is becoming more and more irrelevant. And more of these like independent journalists and independent podcasts are actually kind of telling the truth, is why a lot of these people left mainstream media and went to these independent outfits, which now I'm a part of as well. It's wonderful. It's great. So Donald Trump, he reassured his supporters of his really unwavering commitment. And he's been pledging, and I think he's exemplified this already, but to fight for you, to fight for your family, to fight for your future every day of his presidency. And this message of loyalty and tireless effort resonates. And people believe it because he's acting it out. And I think it resonates strongly. It did last night with the crowd, of course, but those are his supporters, his base. But more and more people are coming into this big tent, so to speak. And Donald Trump, it just underscores Donald Trump's determination to deliver tangible results. Here's part of his plan.
America has given us an unprecedented and powerful mandate. We have taken back control of the Senate. Wow, that's good. And the Senate races in Montana, Nevada, Texas, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, were all won by the MAGA movement. They helped so much. And in those cases, every one of them, we worked with the senators. They were tough races. And I mean, the number of victories in the Senate was absolutely incredible. And we did tele-rallies. We did tele-rallies with each one of them. And sometimes we did 2 or 3 and it was amazing to look at all of those victories. Nobody expected that, nobody. So I just wanted to thank you very much for that. And you have some great senators and some great new senators. And it also looks like we'll be keeping control of the House of Representatives. And I want to thank Mike Johnson. I think he's doing a terrific job, terrific job. I want to also thank my beautiful wife, Melania, First Lady. Who has the #1 best-selling book in the country. Can you believe that? Oh, no, she's done a great job, works very hard to help people. So I just want to thank her. But I want to thank my whole family, my amazing children, and they are amazing children. Now, we all think our children are amazing. Everybody here thinks their children are amazing, but that's a good thing when you think they are. But Don, Eric, Ivanka, Tiffany, Barron, Laura, Jared, Kimberly, Michael, thank you all. What a help. What a great help. My father-in-law, Victor, is tremendous, and we miss very much Melania's mother, Amalia. We miss Amalia, don't we, huh? She would be very happy right now, standing on this stage. She'd be so proud. She was a great woman, that one. Beautiful inside and out. She was a great woman. I want to be the first to congratulate our great, now I can say, Vice President-elect of the United States, J.D. Vance. And his absolutely remarkable and beautiful wife, Usha Vance. And he is a feisty guy, isn't he? You know, I've said, go into the enemy camp, and you know the enemy camp is certain networks. And a lot of people don't like to, sir, do I have to do that? He just goes, okay. Which one? CNN, MSDNC? He'll say, all right, thank you very much. He actually looks fun. He's like the only guy I've ever seen. He really looks forward to it, and then he just goes and absolutely obliterates them.
Yes, J.D. Vance would figuratively obliterate the news media because he would go in very calmly but with facts. Incredible communicator and very well prepared and researched with data that a lot of these journalists could not refute. They didn't know how to because they weren't used to these people going into the quote unquote enemy camp, which they all should, by the way. That's the whole point. That's what you're supposed to do as either a candidate for office or as a somebody who is a member of office in government, wherever you are. And nowadays we're seeing a lot of these politicians refusing to go on certain programs unless these journalists are friendly towards them. And that is kind of the mantra. You know, you're not Democratic friendly enough, so we're not coming on your program. That's what they say nowadays. And it's not the way it's supposed to be. And frankly, and unfortunately, a lot of journalists acquiesce to that and they become Democratic friendly in order to keep access to these people. And it's like that. That's not your job. And so anyway, hopefully that changes. And I really do hope these people, even these journalists they've been educated in these institutions, these universities that are far left and progressive. They've been taught to be a certain way as journalists. Listen, Caitlin Buss was on our program last night. She's with the Detroit News. And she brought up a very important point. Journalists are majoring in journalism, a 4-year degree in journalism, but don't have any clue about how the world works or civics or anything like that. Journalism is a craft in order to help you, write and properly, objectively frame current events. But if you're not educated on those current events and what's the premise to these, why these things are happening, maybe you should take a civics course if you're a journalist. Maybe you should major in political science even, or humanities or something of that nature. History, American history. It'd be great if you're planning to cover the United States. Look at the history of this country, the true history, not the one that's been now implemented by, the CRT advocates and theorists of that nature, but the real history. What happened? The founding of our country. Why do we have the Constitution? What about the Bill of Rights? And why did the Articles of Confederation not work? When we thought it was a good idea, it didn't. So, those types of things you should probably learn about if you're a journalist or if you want to enter into that field. You can minor in journalism. It's a style of writing. It's a way of communication, but don't major in it. Major in something that gives you some background of knowledge, institutional knowledge, that's accurate. Again, you got to be careful on those. Humanities, too, is another area that these universities have botched and they've messed up. And a lot of people come out because of humanity educations in these universities as total, programmed far-left individuals. Anyway, that's another topic. But the point being, I hope journalists are starting to wake up saying, yeah, this is not right. We're not being objective. We're kind of brainwashed. Maybe some of the honest ones will do some self-confrontation and introspection, as I said earlier, and figure things out the right way. I want to mention this because, when it was looking pretty likely that Donald Trump was going to win this election, and everyone is saying, the business world is going to collapse because he's going to, Kamala Harris saying there's going to be a 20% sales tax, which is totally bogus, not true. The business world spoke up when they started seeing this turn of events and this, favorable results coming in for Donald Trump. And immediately, if you watch this last night, we were watching it last night here as it was happening, that the stock market, the futures just shot through the roof, started up with over 500 points. And this morning it's up 1,235. The Dow Jones futures, NASDAQ futures up 325 points, S&P 500 futures up 117. Business likes Trump because they believe the free market is best for business. And if it's good for business, it's good for employees. It means more jobs are coming, and that means it's great for the economy, not just as a whole, but individuals' economies as well, their family economies, their monthly budgets. If they got good paying jobs, which is what a free market will provide, so long as it's allowed to interact the way it's intended to, it's great for individual citizens. That's why the United States is different. Free market's one of them. Capitalism, well, it's not perfect, Sir is good, though, in terms of the economy overall. Pennsylvania, if you were watching, was a very critical state. It was seen ahead of time as the linchpin for the election's outcome. Pennsylvania was, and Donald Trump and his team poured a whole, very considerable effort into the state. So did Kamala Harris as well. And I think she did make a very tactical mistake by not choosing her vice presidential candidate to be Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania. I mean, the guy from Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro. She decided not to go for him and go to Tim Walz instead, which is just another iteration of Kamala Harris, a far left progressive individual who is not doing well for that state. In fact, Minnesota now is becoming more and more towards the red because of Tim Walz and Kamala Harris's. Kamala Harris injected herself into the state of Minnesota in 2020. It was a defund the police message. Kamala Harris is all in on that, bailing people out, helping to bail people out of jail that were committing violent crimes and felonies. She was helping to bail them out so they can continue on their trajectory of ruining the state. And people remember that, 4 years later. They still have their businesses that were burned down to the ground by violent rioters in the state of Minnesota. You don't forget that right away. So Kamala Harris made her mark in Minnesota, as did Tim Walz, specifically as it related to the 2020 riots and the continued lockdowns of people's lives. So Donald Trump proudly announcing his win in Pennsylvania, that it was a victory for the people's voice. And then he mentioned J.D. Vance, now Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. He came up and spoke. He echoed Donald Trump's sentiments, describing the campaign as the greatest political comeback in American history. J.D. Vance emphasizing that Donald Trump's leadership will not only keep fighting for Americans, but will also bring forth a remarkable economic revival.
Well, Mr. President, I appreciate you allowing me to join you on this incredible journey. I thank you for the trust that you placed in me. And I think that we just witnessed the greatest political comeback in the history of the United States of America. And under President Trump's leadership, we're never going to stop fighting for you, for your dreams, for the future of your children. And after the greatest political comeback in American history, we're going to lead the greatest economic comeback in American history under Donald Trump's leadership.
Yep, that man there, J.D. Vance, he is likely the future of the Republican Party. Remember, Donald Trump just has one more term. This would be his second term in office. So that means he's going to be term limited. He'll be out. And J.D. Vance is now being set up as the heir apparent, and rightfully so. He is a brilliant mind, but he's also like an everyday American who brought himself up under extremely difficult circumstances, as you've probably seen or read the book, Hillbilly Elegy. Maybe you saw the film. But it's the story of his life as a young individual and how he was raised and overcoming tremendous obstacles in his life to eventually become a Harvard grad and now the vice president-elect of this country. Only in America, right, can that happen. Back to Donald Trump in his speech, he vowed a few things. He vowed to restore America's safety, prosperity, strength, and independence. And his vision is to restore American power and freedom, and calling it a noble and a righteous endeavor for all citizens to unite around. If he wants everyone, even the ones that didn't vote for him, he truly does want them to succeed. And he reached out to them many times over when he was president the first term. Time and again, he brought his enemies into the White House to meet with them and talk with them. And some of them came around and said, this guy's not all I've been told he was. And it's pretty remarkable when people's eyes open up and see that the media has just been putting this veil in front of their eyes and suppressing information to make him look like a dictator. He is not. He's the opposite of a dictator. He would not have himself been successful in a dictatorial regime. Is because of freedom and individual liberties that Donald Trump's family and he has succeeded so much in business and personally. Look at his family. They all support him. So his victory was celebrated not just by, political supporters, but also prominent figures from various sectors who have come around as well. Elon Musk, he was celebrated last night, and Joe Rogan had said that maybe if it not for Elon Musk, Joe Rogan would not have come around and endorsed Donald Trump, and likely many other Americans would not have either. UFC CEO Dana White, did you see his speech and how the way he described Donald Trump? Yeah, he's a fighter, but a fighter in a good way. You got pro golfer Bryson DeChambeau, symbolizing this whole coalition of private sector leaders who are in alignment with Donald Trump's vision. And why not? That's where Donald Trump came out of, the private sector. It's good for America. So looking forward now, Donald Trump, he's highlighting his ongoing advantage in these other battleground states like Michigan, where I happen to be right now, and in Arizona. And again, we're still watching those states to see what the outcomes there will be. It looks like both will potentially go to Donald Trump. But again, Wayne County in Michigan still being counted. Very, very long count for them. But that could potentially push his electoral vote count to over 315. I think right now it's still 277 right now, the projected vote count, electoral votes. So his assertion of winning the popular vote as well, which he has, I think really aims to reinforce the legitimacy and the breadth of his victory. So you can't have Hillary Clinton now come out or Kamala Harris and say, which they did ad nauseum, they still do today, that the 2016 election was rigged in Donald Trump's favor. That was their messaging for years and years after Donald Trump won. But they didn't like it when Donald Trump said it about 2020. You go figure. So as Kamala Harris in her campaign, they retreated. It was amazing to watch as we were watching the live video feed of Donald Trump's election headquarters versus Kamala Harris's election headquarters. Kamala Harris in Washington, D.C. at her alma mater, telling her supporters to go home. Kamala's not going to come out and speak to you tonight. Go ahead and go home. She'll do this in the morning. It's reminiscent of 2016. Remember, Hillary Clinton pretty much did the same thing. She opted not to address her supporters. Donald Trump was steadfast. He had a high-energy rally, a very clear contrast between these two, and really positioning him as ready to lead immediately. And the Harris's campaign, that decision left, I think, an impression of resignation amidst Donald Trump's momentum. What is she going to say after all that? What she should say is, listen, congratulations, Donald Trump. And Kamala Harris speaking here, I shouldn't have lied about you. I apologize. That's probably not going to happen. We do have some comments here, and I always appreciate it. If you're watching on YouTube or X or on Facebook, you can continue to comment. I'll take more of them up here in just a moment as well, or ask me some questions. But I always like to get to them, so let's take a few right now. Arlene is back with us. A win for free speech and equal justice, and so many more American ideals. No COVID mandates, no EV mandates, end of DEI, CRT, have secure borders. Hooray for common sense policies. Amen, Arlene. You're right on, and that is all true. And people say, well, those lockdown mandates came while Donald Trump was president. It wasn't his jurisdiction. They came in these far-left Democratic states where the governors have control of those states. Donald Trump tried to push back against those mandates. Remember the lockdowns that were occurring? He didn't like it. And I'll just give you an example. Governor Gretchen Whitmer in the state of Michigan, she locked down the economy. She ruined the economy. Very few people can go to work. Businesses had to shut down by punishment of potentially imprisonment. And Dana Nessel, the attorney general, was going after these restaurant owners who were like economically and fiscally dying, saying, I need to open. We're going to be good. Nope. And a few tried. And then she went after them. Pretty hardcore. And then now, during this election season, people like Gretchen Whitmer, they blamed Donald Trump for Michigan's decline in 2020 economically. It was her against Donald Trump's wishes, but again, she has jurisdiction. She took unilateral control of the state. She shut it down. The Democratic Party was in lockstep with, at that time, the Kamala Harris and Joe Biden campaign to do anything they could to make Donald Trump look bad. And one way to do it is to bring down the economy. And that was their strategy. And I think a large part it worked, because that's exactly what happened. And we're still feeling the effects today. We will for many years to come. All right, thank you, Arlene. Always good to hear from you. Let's bring up another comment. I'll get to some Senate races here. Let's bring in Charles Beatty. Good to hear from you again, Charles. Amazing coverage last night. Thank you, Wayne Radio, and thank you, Tom, and your family for taking the leap to be here, keeping us informed with truth. Charles, that means a lot to me, and you were very kind last night as well when you chimed in. Yeah, but you don't have to thank me. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm having the most fun in this particular job now that I'm doing that I have, I think, in my entire career. And I've been in journalism for many years prior to this. I really loved it and loved the news media and talk radio just previous to this job. I enjoyed it, but this is so much more enjoyable. Why? Because it's uncensored. And I'm not being told to no longer talk about COVID, no longer talk about any sense of potential fraud. Don't talk badly about Democrats or don't even, not just badly, don't confront them on the issues at all. Don't care about the issues, those kinds of things. I don't have to hear that anymore. So it's free. And that means you also have a voice as well. Always welcome here at Tom Jordan Live. Charles, thanks so much. We'll get to a few more comments in a few seconds here. I want to talk about the Senate. Because this is a huge part of the election victory of last night, because it's projected that there's going to be a Republican majority in the Senate in 2025, which ends the Democrat control that they've had in the Senate since 2021. And this shift does signal, a whole lot of voter frustration with current policies and this demand for change in Washington's priorities. And I'll give you just one, I say small example, because it was just one of many things that the Senate did under Democratic control, under the guise that they cared about the U.S.-Mexico border. The House of Representatives, under a Republican majority, passed what was known as H.R. 2, which dealt directly with illegal immigration and securing the border. It solved the issue. 100%, well, 90%. If they just implemented H.R. 2, about 90% of all the issues at the border would have been resolved. The problem is Joe Biden already had those authorities. He didn't want that to occur. So it was the Democrats in the Senate who wouldn't even bring it up for a vote. Passed in the House, sent it to the Senate. The Senate wouldn't even look at it. Instead, they came up with their own bill, and now they characterize this as the fix for the border, but it wasn't a fix at all. If you hear their language, what they talk about is reforming immigration. What that really means is what this bill allowed, which was almost 2 million illegal immigrants a year allowed to come into this country and be given legal status when they come over. It also gives a very strong pathway for all the illegal immigrants who are currently in the country to put them on a very quick pathway to U.S. citizenship, but almost right away give them legal status, which means what? They can all get driver's licenses, they can all get jobs, and they can basically live as if they were American citizens, even though they came here illegally. And what was the whole goal of that? They say it's because they care about individuals. No, they care about holding on to power. It is so obvious because so many of them now are giving IDs and driver's licenses. And what does a driver's license do? It allows you to vote. Essentially, if you can show ID, I mean, they're not even going to ask you your citizenship. They can't ask you your citizenship. They just say, oh, you got an ID, you can vote now. So this whole idea that it was something else, do you see what's happening here? I mean, do you understand now based on what they've been trying to get away with for so many years and just, unilaterally, essentially, with this majority, Democratic majority in the legislatures around this country, stripping away voter integrity laws to make it easier for anyone to vote. That is happening. And we know that's the case in Michigan. I do wonder if Michigan would have been a bigger margin for Donald Trump. It hasn't been called yet. If it wasn't for these very, very lax voter integrity laws in the state of Michigan and elsewhere. Anyway, that's just one example of what, because of the Democratic control of the Senate, what they were allowed to get away with and put out this false narrative that they're really trying to protect the border and U.S. citizens. That's not what they were doing. They could have. They didn't. That's all going to change. And the American population has demanded that change as well. So the GOP, the Republican Party, they very, very favorable Senate map as a result of last night, and they benefited from a whole lot of contest in traditionally conservative states, of course, which would make it easier to defend and win critical seats in those respective states. In contrast, Democrats faced a big and pretty uphill battle with several vulnerable seats up for grabs in the battleground in the right-leaning states as well. West Virginia, this was a critical thing that Joe Manchin had stepped and resigned from that position because West Virginia is a conservative state, and Joe Manchin was a Democrat. While he was a moderate Democrat, what that seat allowed for was for the Democrats to have control and to pick their committee leaders and the chairs of these various committees, which gave them authority over which bills would be voted upon or which would be brought up on the floors and those kinds of things. They had control, and they prevented a lot of things that were Republican or more conservative and may have actually helped this country. So West Virginia, very pivotal in this. Jim Justice was the GOP candidate there in West Virginia, all but guaranteed to succeed the outgoing Senator Joe Manchin. So that seat alone puts Republicans within, just that seat would have put them in striking distance of the majority. The impact of, local voters shifting away from the Democrats there, it's pretty critical. And when I say local voters in the state of West Virginia. Arizona, wow, a fierce battleground after Senator Kyrsten Sinema decided to resign as well, her departure from that Senate seat. And she was one that was very just baffled by the Democratic Party and got a lot of pushback. Talk about intimidation and threats from politicians. It was the Democrats constantly. If you remember, Kyrsten Sinema being followed into the restroom stall by these Democratic activists trying to pressure her to vote. At that time, I think it was the voting bill or something like that she was holding out on because you can see it was completely unethical. And she held her ground, and she was a strong advocate for strong borders, and they didn't like that either. So Democrats, without her there, they struggled to hold that critical swing seat as well, which played a really significant role in the overall Senate balance. And, Arizona is a unique state as well because it was traditionally a Republican stronghold, but it's been shifting as of late. So as you've noticed with these two Democratic senators in the state of Arizona, Kelly, the other one. Ohio, Sherrod Brown, boy, he lost. Montana, Senator John Tester lost as well. Several others as well in these really tough re-election battles. Those Democrats there really representing the right leaning or the battleground states had little room for error. And they made some errors and made some missteps, primarily trying to align themselves with the Democratic Party. That's a misstep nowadays in those red-leaning states. So their seats were targeted. Well-funded campaigns took them out of contention. So I think the voters are increasingly, they're aligning along party lines for the most part. You got a red state, you're more than likely they're going to have a conservative senator now representing you. A little bit different than it was, and the presidential election race helps in that as well. And the outcomes, a lot of these races hinged on that presidential race outcome, making these split ticket voting thing kind of a rare phenomenon nowadays. And it's a trend that was emphasized, I think, this growing polarization in American politics. Yeah, it's there. It is very polarized. But there's a reason, because these two parties there's a stark difference in ideology between Republicans nowadays and Democrats nowadays. Debbie Stabenow, so this is interesting. The outgoing Michigan Senator Debbie Stabenow, and I want to get an update on this race in Michigan between Mike Rogers and Alyssa Slotkin to see where it stands, because the last I checked, it was a tie, 48.5% for both of these candidates, but Alyssa Slotkin had a few thousand more votes than Mike Rogers. And now, sure enough, looks like Slotkin had 48.6% as of about 9 minutes ago. 48.6, Mike Rogers 48.4%. And that's with 98% of the votes being counted. That's a lead of just over 11,000 votes for Alyssa Slotkin. This has been an interesting, the way they're counting and releasing the voter counts in Wayne County, again, where Detroit is located in that county. They decided to release those results very slowly overnight, as it's the largest county, of course, in the state of Michigan, and Detroit, the largest city in the states. There's a lot to be counted, but they decided to take a different tactic than other counties, which was to release them as they're going. Wayne County, very slow to do that. So it looks right now that Alyssa Slotkin is up just barely, 48.6 to Mike Rogers, 48.4%. And typically, I think if it's less than a half a percentage point in the end, I believe that's the rule in Michigan that automatically triggers a recount. By the way, Michigan law instituted by this legislature, and I think it's now in effect. I'm not sure if it did actually go into effect. Now they're going to wait till 2025. But Jocelyn Benson, who was refusing that if there's any evidence of fraud, you cannot use that evidence as a reason for a recount in the state of Michigan. No longer. She fought hard, tooth and nail, to prevent a recount based on allegations of fraud. Because why? Why would she do that? Maybe because there's a lot of allegations of fraud in her state based on the new laws that she has been supporting that allows pretty much anyone. You can register the same day in Michigan. And there's absolutely no way to validate that voter, that voter is even a citizen, or that's even the real name of that particular voter, because it takes a couple of weeks for the Social Security Administration to validate that individual as a legitimate voter in the U.S. So, but same-day registration, they've now allowed that. And yesterday they had about, I think, almost 10,000 same-day registered voters. And I think there were about 35,000 on the voter rolls that registered in the past couple of weeks that nobody can find who they are. 35,000 voters in the state of Michigan that don't match anything that the Social Security Administration has. So anyway, but that's not allowed now to be used as any type of meaningful reason for a recount. So anyway, that's Debbie Stabenow, a longtime serving senator, Democrat in the state of Michigan. She resigned her seat. It's open now, and now Alyssa Slotkin leading Mike Rogers by a few thousand votes in that state. So right now, listen, it could be a 51-seat majority going into the election, but that's what the Democrats have had. And the Democrats, with that razor-thin margin, had control. And if there was one, stray Democrat, you just get the Democratic vice president come in to cast the tie-breaking vote as well. So they've had control of the Senate, and that had huge consequences on policies with a Democratic president as well. So it's very interesting what we're watching there. It looks like the Senate is in the hands of the Republican come January, and it looks like the House will maintain majority with the Republicans as well. So expect some substantial changes in the legislative approach, particularly in policies that have been flashpoints over the past couple of years. We're talking about energy. Maybe no more EV mandates, huh? You don't have to buy an EV by 2032 or 2035, like there won't be any gas cars available. That was the goal, that was the trajectory, and that may all be done away with because it wasn't realistic anyway. They weren't going to be able to meet that demand. That mandate was severe, costly, and it was ruining the auto industry. The Ford and General Motors and Stellantis losing tons of money on every electric vehicle that was built. I think they were losing like $50,000 a car, losing per car. It's a lot of money for a car that shouldn't even be that expensive to buy in the first place. So border security, of course, will be a big issue as well. All right, let's see if we have any more comments and questions. And if there aren't any, chime in. We do have Lee Santiago. Tom, do you think last night's Trump win will make a real move for Wayne County or Detroit to have a real Republican presence? Look at Hamtramck. What balance would this make in Lansing? All right, yeah, I do actually, because I think when you're talking about the state politics, you have these smaller jurisdictions within Wayne County. So I think, is potentially going to have an impact. I don't think this election cycle you're going to see Republicans representing that portion of Wayne County, which is Detroit. Now, there's other portions like maybe Canton and Plymouth where you're going to see more Republican representatives in those areas, sure. So portions of Wayne County. Hamtramck, but that's a very interesting case because Hamtramck, an all-Muslim city council and a Muslim mayor who had been leaning towards the Democrats and very supportive of the Democrats in power, but they've realized as well that, listen, the Democrat policies do not align with the way we view the world, which is always something, and I've mentioned this before, but it's always boggled my mind with how socially far left the Democratic Party is and their support of things that most Muslims can't stand. They are so opposed to these things. And if you try to flout certain aspects of your identity in Gaza or in some other Muslim country, they're not going to last long there in terms of your support in there. And it could be worse. I mean, that's just the reality of it. They have severe laws and severe penalties for things like, homosexuality and transgenderism and all these far left socialist things, transgender surgery, abortion. I mean, they don't support any of those things. So why have so many Muslims been so supportive of the Democratic Party? And it really came to light. One of the things that came out in Dearborn, Michigan, which is the largest concentration of Muslims in the United States, when they started realizing what was in the schools in Dearborn, in the Dearborn School District, these books that, you see these bumper stickers. I was driving behind somebody yesterday on the way into work, and the bumper sticker with a rainbow on it said, "Read banned books." As if banned books are these things that, Catcher in the Rye or those types of things are what they're talking about. No, actually, what really the books that are being banned in these, or attempting to be banned in these schools, are lessons on how to have sex when you're, in third grade. Step-by-step instructions. Are you feeling like you might be gay? Well, here's how to have gay sex. Those types of things. And you don't believe me, but there's animation, there's drawings of specifically how to do these different things, and those are the books that are inappropriate for little children. Kindergarten through third grade. I would say through high school they shouldn't be reading that stuff anyway. But just say kindergarten, third grade. Would you, as a parent, really support your kid reading that kind of stuff? And it's not just, homosexual, it's heterosexual sex and all the perverted. I mean, I don't think you should read this, but I've read some of it, and it's pretty outlandish. They won't even allow you, if you go to a city council meeting or a school board meeting and you pop open one of the books that they support and you attempt to read it to them, it is so foul and profane, they won't allow you to read it in that session. They'll tell you to stop and put it down, ignoring the fact that that's the book they say they support in their schools. Those are the banned books that the media won't tell. When they say banned books, that's what conservatives hopefully will ban schools providing to your children. And that's when that came to light in Dearborn, the Muslim community erupted. So we don't want this in our schools. What are you doing? This is what you're teaching our kids, or allowing them to read and supporting behind closed doors and not telling their parents about it, pretending they don't exist. And that's a lot of the feedback I got as well. Like, oh, you're just making this up. None of those books are in the schools. You could walk into a school library and find it right there. And it's pretty much in every single school district in the state of Michigan. It's not just these far left areas. Conservative counties, their schools also have these books. And most parents are not aware of that. And that's some members of certain school boards are trying to keep it quiet. And that's just part of it. Anyway, so all that to say that I do think, to your question, these areas that have been traditionally Democratic strongholds, and you look at the Muslim population, Jewish populations as well, their eyes are starting to open up too. Like, I don't think the Democrats really do have our back here, like they've been pretending they have been for years. They're starting to wake up. So we can, in the African-American community as well, Detroit is about 90-something% plus African-American. And we've seen a shift and a trend towards Republicans, because I think a lot of them, still the majority are voting Democrat, and I'm not going to pretend they're not. But a lot of them are saying, this has not worked for my family for generations now. Let's give someone else a chance here. And the same with the Hispanic vote. I was like 48% Hispanics in this country, I think, voted for Donald Trump. So they're coming around. Majorities and minorities in this country are realizing, okay, what's best for me as an individual citizen in this country, which this country was founded to benefit every individual citizen. So why isn't it? Why is it not? Why are there all these oppressive rules and regulations and bureaucracies telling me how to live my life or else? Yeah, so I think they're realizing that's the case. So anyway, good question. Do we have time for another one here? Adam's watching the comments and the questions come in. Oh, cool name. Karthik. Is Anthony Blinken going to keep his position as Secretary of State? He's destroyed democracies in South Asia and nearly triggered civil war in India. Well, no, Anthony Blinken will not be keeping his position, because he'll be ousted along with Joe Biden's going to be out, obviously. Kamala Harris is not going to get a chance, and he's totally opposed policy-wise to Donald Trump. In fact, if you go back to 2016, it was Anthony Blinken who was instrumental in the Joe Biden campaign by convincing 51 intelligence officials to lie about the Hunter Biden laptop. He got them all to coalesce around his campaign, Joe Biden's campaign, and to put out a statement lying that the Hunter Biden laptop has all the earmarks or the hallmarks, however they phrase it, of Russian propaganda. That was Antony Blinken who did that. And what did he get rewarded for? That move that he did, which should have been illegal. He should have been arrested and charged with that. That type of purposeful election interference. He got this job as Secretary of State. So no, you're right. He's you mentioned Asia and these other places. You look at the Middle East, and he has been very careful walking this fine line about how he approaches this conflict between Hamas and Israel. And he, I think his ideology really does align with the Palestinians over the Israelis when it comes to who should be living in that land. And there's a lot of people like them. Kamala Harris, the same thing. Joe Biden, I know he kind of says we support Israel. And a lot of Muslims have now gone against Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. But it's not because, in my opinion here, it's not because Kamala Harris and Joe Biden don't personally support Palestine. It's that they're not vocal and public enough about that and denouncing Israel. I am a total supporter of Israel. I think they have every right to live in that land. And there's never been a Palestinian state, ever. I don't know if you've been told otherwise, but no, there's never been a country called Palestine. And you can go back to the history of Palestine, why that became the name of that region. It wasn't because Palestinians lived there. It was because after 70 A.D., quick little history here. 70 A.D., of course, Rome came in and they destroyed Jerusalem. They kicked many of the Jews out of there. They destroyed the temple and the Temple Mount. And they got rid of basically Judea, the land of Judea at that point. But I think it was around 120 A.D., maybe 130. I don't have the time frame exactly correct here, but it's around that time frame. A lot of Jews wanted to come back to their homeland, rightfully so. Well, Rome didn't like that either, so they kicked him out for good. And they were so anti-Semitic that in order to make them realize you're never coming back here, so we're going to rename Israel or Judea the name of your ultimate enemy from the Old Testament, which was the Philistines. The Philistines and Israel, if you read your Old Testament, they were loggerheads for centuries. Number one enemy of Israel were the Philistines. Well, in Latin, the word for Philistine essentially was Palestinian or Palestine. So that's why they gave it the name. It was to rub it in the Jews' noses, in their faces, that now it's not only Judea anymore. You're not even not going to live here. We're going to change the name to the Philistines, basically. And that word was Palestines. The Palestinians didn't live there. And that's how that name came about. And for almost 2,000 years, it was known as Palestine, but that's the reason why. Not because it was a Palestinian state and there were Palestinian people. Go read your history. That's not the way it was. Palestinians are primarily from Jordan, essentially. Jordan is their homeland. So they do have a homeland right now, and good for them, they should. But Israel belongs to the Jews, rightfully so. And historically speaking, that has been the case for thousands of years. All right, very much sorry for that little aside there, but that's just a little brief history lesson on Palestine and Israel and why I'm so supportive of Israel in this. In fact, in terms of who should have that land. All right. Listen, really appreciate your time. Very excited to keep this going here on Tom Jordan Live. Had a great turnout last night. Thanks again for watching and being part of it. And for all those who showed up at our first ever election night watch party for Tom Jordan Live here in Brighton, Michigan at the Wayne Radio headquarters. We'll be back here tomorrow at the same time, 9 a.m., broadcasting live, Tom Jordan Live. Until then, God bless you. Have a fantastic day.